So good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today for our Design Thinking Frameworks webinar, How to Empathize with Your Customer. This webinar series is a part of our HAAS HBCU Making and Innovation monthly virtual engagement. And I just want to thank you all for joining us today. So my name is Iris Wagstaff, and I am a STEM Program Director at AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, in our Inclusive STEM Ecosystems for Equity and Diversity, or IC unit. Our programs and portfolio focus on broadening participation in STEM and inclusive innovation. I just want to share a little bit about AAAS for those of you who may be new to AAAS. Most people know us through our science magazines, but we actually have a family of journals that include topics like robotics and translational medicine. The mission of AAAS is to advance science, engineering, and innovation throughout the world for the benefit of all people. It's a huge mission, but we accomplish this mission through a variety of programs, initiatives, and efforts. AAAS was founded in 1848, and today we have over 200,000 members worldwide. For more information about AAAS, you can visit our website at AAAS.org. And also, we have another resource that may be useful to this audience, which is our Science Careers website, where you can find employment opportunities as well as internship and fellowship opportunities. So just a little bit about our initiative. This work is supported by the National Science Foundation through a grant from the HBCU Up program. And the focus of this grant is on supporting and advancing making innovation, entrepreneurship, and invention efforts at HBCUs. And we are accomplishing this overall goal through a number of efforts that include our yearly HBCU Making and Innovation Showcase, where student HBCU teams, along with a faculty advisor, develop and pitch a prototype or innovation in response to one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And if you're not familiar with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, these goals include addressing global issues like eradicating poverty and developing renewable energy sources. Some other key components of this project and this grant include this webinar series, our year-long virtual monthly engagements. We are also developing an e-mentoring and coaching platform, as well as developing a resource toolkit for HBCUs in making and innovation. So now I'd like to acknowledge our project team. In addition to myself, I am principal investigator on this grant. We have Neva White, who is co-PI for this project and also a AAAS project director. And we also have Parrot Clayton as part of our team, who is our AAAS program associate. I'd also like to acknowledge our National Science Foundation program officers that support this work. Carlita Page Anderson is the lead program officer for this project, as well as Michelle Claville and Emmanuel Waddell. So I definitely want to thank them for all of their support of our efforts. Next, I'd like to congratulate our 12 HBCU teams who were selected for our 2021 HBCU Making and Innovation Showcase, which will be held from September 23rd to the 25th and in Washington, D.C. And hopefully we have our cohort participate in this webinar today. So I just want to acknowledge 12 teams from the schools that you see. We're really proud of your work and can't wait to see your pitches for the innovations that you're developing. Next, I'd like to thank all of our supporters and collaborators. We have developed a number of strategic collaborations and partnerships with STEM professionals, tech entrepreneurs, as well as science agencies and nonprofits. So we really like to thank you, our supporters, for all of their support and input for this project and our efforts. We are always looking for collaborators and partners for this effort. So if anyone is interested in meeting with us or just learning more about this project and how you may be able to support or collaborate with us, please feel free to contact myself or Neela White at iwagstaff@AAAS.org or nwhite@AAAS.org. And now on to our featured presenter for today. I am really excited to have her. The focus of today's webinar is on design thinking, and we're hoping that this will be beneficial to you to use as a framework as our cohort of teams are developing and working through the ideation process for the innovation that you're developing. And Dr. Chinonye Nnakwe Whitley will share some of her expertise in this work and give you a firm introduction to the design thinking framework from an empathy standpoint. So I'm really excited to have her today. She served as a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow with me. She's doing some amazing work. I'd also like to note the disclaimer here that Dr. Whitley is participating in her personal capacity, and her participation does not constitute an endorsement by the National Science Foundation or the United States government. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Chinonye Nnakwe Whitley to share with us the design thinking framework from an empathy standpoint. Welcome, Dr. Whitley.
Hi, Iris. How you doing? I'm just gonna fill the space while I change the screen. All right, folks. It's so wonderful to see everyone in the meeting, the virtual space. My name is Chinonye Nnakwe Whitley, but everyone affectionately knows me as Chi-Chi or Dr. Chi-Chi. Either one is fine. I really appreciate the opportunity to see everyone here and share my knowledge, which has come from accumulation of different professional experiences that I've had. When Iris gave me a call, I figured I absolutely have to be able to share, and I hope that the information that I'm able to present to you will be helpful. I want to make sure that I also thank AAAS, as well as the project team, Iris, Neela, and Tarek, for the invitation. And, I work in the government, so you can't really say this enough. Because I do work in the policy space and I have my own personal activities, I have to make sure that it's clear that all of the information that I'm sharing with you is from my own personal knowledge, and I'm participating in this showcase under my own personal capacity. My participation does not constitute an endorsement by the National Science Foundation or the US government. And so I just want to make sure that I'm clear. There are resources that I will share that NSF provides, and this is all public information, as well as the resources that I share throughout the presentation. And so attendees will be receiving a copy of this presentation after the webinar, and you'll be able to access all of the links that I've sourced throughout. All right, so now that we got that disclaimer out the way, let's make sure that we are able to shout out everything that you're learning. And as you proceed on your design thinking journey, share it with the world. I encourage you to use the chat. I'm very interactive, and I really encourage you to talk about what you're learning on Twitter, on Instagram. We have a hashtag for the AAAS HBCU Maker Showcase, as well as my own hashtag, Designing Diversity. And that's how I'm able to see what everyone has been saying. And so I appreciate your activity. I want to admit that typically when we are providing design challenges or design innovation training, I am not supposed to be doing very much talking because it's a learning by doing exercise. But for the benefit of this webinar, so that people can actually learn particular concepts, I will be talking quite a bit. And so if there's information that you're learning, if there's questions that you have, please, please, please use the chat, tweet it out, put it on Instagram. It's all good. And so to get you warmed up, I'm already going to ask you to put your thoughts in the chat or on Twitter. And I'd like to know what brought you to the webinar. I do see some friendly faces in the group, and I really appreciate seeing you all here. But for folks who've not heard of design thinking or, are still new to this whole innovation journey, let me know, what is it that brought you here? All right, and so I'm going to give you the opportunity to go ahead and put that in the chat, and then I'll continue. All right. So what I'm going to do is give a brief overview of myself, my background, as well as design thinking frameworks. I can't talk about design thinking and be a scientist and not talk about some similarities and differences. So we'll do a quick touch on that. And then we'll do a deep dive into the first aspect of the framework, which is empathy, or building empathy with your customer. We'll end with a charge, some type of exercise, and we'll do some next steps and provide some resources for innovators interested in additional funding. So over the last 15 plus years, my trajectory as a scientist and as an innovator has been very nonlinear, much like design thinking. I started off as a trainee trying to understand molecular biology as well as cancer biology, and then have been able to act in a variety of spaces to be able to impact broadening participation at a global scale. I first started out with my training in Illinois, first at University of Illinois and then at University of Chicago. And I was very intrigued. Hey, ILL, nice to see you, I. I was very intrigued to see how our body worked at the molecular level. And so with the bachelor's in biochemistry and a PhD in pathology, I was able to study DNA damage and the response to DNA damage and understand kind of the downstream pathways that are activated as a response to the body's efforts to protect itself. My particular research focused on telomeres and the ability to signal DNA double-strand break damage, such that I wanted to understand the role of this and chromatin in initiating cell cycle arrest at various stages. After I finished my PhD, I wanted a different adventure. And so I went into industry and worked as a management consultant at Campbell Alliance, now Inventive Health. My experience within that time focused on various areas that include managed markets, where I conducted pricing surveys with stakeholders in the insurance industry to understand if products would be even considered viable for support from insurance companies. I also performed customer segmentation analyses. And then in the marketing area, I helped companies launch products that they were planning to support if they were able to be approved by the FDA. And so these endeavors would take about 6 weeks, and the projects were about $500,000 each. And so that was my first exposure to the corporate environment and to very large scale projects and problems that companies experience. After that, I wanted to delve back into a particular passion of mine, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I went back to the University of Chicago to serve as the director of graduate diversity initiatives. There, I was working in the provost's office to be able to conduct campus-wide initiatives around attracting amazing students from underrepresented groups to our graduate programs. And so some of the highlights of the work that I did included running a summer research program from recruitment to graduation. And I did wonderful things and met amazing scholars along the way who are out there doing amazing work. This is one of our last photos from, I wanna say 2015, and it was an amazing experience. I also worked to create a national research mentoring network professional development initiative that provided research mentor training for faculty and professional development for postdocs, typically from underrepresented groups. And the idea was that I can bring in trainees to do wonderful work at the University of Chicago, but then I could also impact the climate there by ensuring that the faculty would be ready and be able to share and develop their skills as mentors so that the students would stay. And so that work was also rewarding in itself. And all of these and others required great partnerships and collaborations and engagement with stakeholders across the campus. I then wanted to take the work that I was doing to the next level and work at a national scale, and that drew me to AAAS and the Science and Technology Policy Fellowships. I served as a Science and Technology Policy Fellow at the National Science Foundation, and I was embedded within the I-Corps program. My mentor was Anita LaSalle, who's one of the architects of the I-Corps program, especially the I-Corps sites portion of the program. And there I got to have a deep dive into technical innovation and technology transfer within the academic space. I not only observed over 200 teams go through the I-Corps program, I also had the opportunity to help develop initiatives on behalf of the program. And some of the things I'm very proud of is publishing a paper on the history of the I-Corps program and its impact on advancing academic technology innovation. And as well, developing a program where we provided supplement awards to I-Corps sites to increase the participation and promote inclusion of underrepresented populations in entrepreneurship. And this pilot touched upon multiple aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion, be it for differently abled individuals, racial and ethnic minorities, first-generation college students, women, as well as minority serving institution participation in the I-Corps program. And so now my work as a program officer is particularly rewarding because I work with the established program to stimulate competitive research, where we focus on engaging institutions at a national scale in competitive research. And we have done quite a bit of work to work at the jurisdiction-wide or statewide, for example, level. But some of the things that I'm very proud of are our AppScore Research Fellows program, where we have a new initiative called Track 4 Fast that provides opportunities for faculty to go to NASA research centers to conduct faculty fellowships. And this initiative is particularly for minority serving institutions such as HBCUs, primarily undergraduate institutions, women's colleges, institutions serving individuals with disabilities, and community colleges. In addition to working within AppScore, I've also had the wonderful opportunity to collaborate across the agency to develop the BP Innovate initiative, where we're working to stimulate social science research that is at the intersection of broadening participation, STEM entrepreneurship, and innovation. And so, as you can see, what brings me here and my cred, which is what we talk about in the innovation world, is what are you known for, right? I'm known for developing national partnerships, collaborations, building new innovations with stakeholders, and affecting change at the local and national level. And extensive human engagement has been part of my work at every step of the way. And so what I want for you to understand and to learn about from the session is, what are kind of those basic blocks for human engagement? And that's where we head towards human-centered design. And so the work that I'm going to be presenting, the presentation is focused on individuals who are just starting out. So I see there's already some experts in the house, and this might not be for you. This might be like well beyond what you already know. You may already be an expert, but I focus my talk for folks who may just be getting exposure to human-centered design and design thinking. And so I'll be sharing those definitions with you throughout. Human-centered design is an approach to problem solving, and it's commonly used as a design and management framework to develop solutions to problems. These problems often involve the human perspective, and the human perspective is integral to involving human perspective at each step of the problem solving process. And so human-centered design is often used in business because you are trying to do what? Sell something to a person or a company or an entity with people. So there are 4 principles that you have to understand. You first have to understand the people that are involved, what they're interested in. You have to focus what you're developing on those people, okay? So notice I'm not saying the idea or the technology that you have. You have to solve the right problem that's going to address those people's needs and wants. And you have to know that the first solution that you try to put forth is likely going to change, and you're going to need to go back to those people to iterate and refine until you have something at a minimal level that will be sufficient to get someone to fork over some cash and to purchase your product. Oh, yes. Hi, Aaron.
Hello. Hey, can you go back to the last slide, just so I can take a picture of it?
You want to take a picture? Okay. You're also going to get the slides.
Okay.
So you know. But I can understand.
Thank you.
Don't forget the source. Okay. Let me make sure. All right. So central to human-centered design is design thinking, which is a human-centered approach or strategy to innovation. And it's very much anchored in understanding what a customer needs. It also includes prototyping at a quick pace and generating creative ideas. The approach itself is going to transform how you develop products or the services or processes or the organizations that you're leveraging to serve the folks that you're trying to help out. And by using this approach, you're making decisions based on what your customer really wants, rather than relying on instincts or what you think or what kind of hunches you might have, right? And so what you want to do is bring together a very desirable point of view from your customer and then incorporate it into the technology that you're developing. The parts that the design thinking approach brings is it helps you unearth desirability, and that's where you often start. What is it that's making sense to people, and what is it that they want? You're bringing together feasibility, so what is actually technically possible, especially within the foreseeable future, and what's viable, what's likely to become part of a business model that can be sustained by revenue from your customer. And so now that I've introduced a very brief definition, let's take a poll and let me know your level of familiarity and where y'all are coming from. So Tara, can you shoot the poll? Okay, let's find out. So let me know, what is your knowledge of design thinking? And where are you coming from? Are you a member of the cohort from last year? Are you a member from the cohort from this year? Are you from a different location altogether? Okay. All right. So we see there's quite a few folks that are bringing some knowledge. I appreciate that. And we have a lot of folks that are from other spaces. This is really interesting. This is great. And hopefully also the last two cohorts will also be able to catch the recording. All right, so about 90% of folks have voted. I think we can get ready to close the poll. The last two people, you have a chance, but I think we need to continue on at this point. All right, and then we can share the results. So what do you all think? It's quite a few of you who's bringing some knowledge, but quite a few folks who may not know. So I hope that these slides will be helpful to you. And we also have a very diverse group of folks representing. All right, so let's continue. All right, so now that I shared a definition of design thinking, I want you to understand that there are several aspects to this approach. If you Google design thinking, you're going to see quite a few different frameworks and words. But what you want to understand is that there's three primary areas that you're going to be focusing on. First, you're going to be conducting activities to understand your customer, trying to understand or empathize with what they're going through, what is their daily work, what activities are particularly painful or joyful to them. We call those pain creators or gain creators. And you're going to also seek to define the problems that they have based on the empathy or the information you gain by empathizing with your customers. The next stage is exploring potential solutions that will address the problems that you've defined from the earlier stage. Here you're going to be ideating or brainstorming. You're going to be going through a very divergent exercise to identify as many ideas and solutions that could be that could address the problems that your customer might have. And then the next step is to prototype. And here is kind of the fun aspect, I think, of design thinking, because you will actually build something that you think is a solution. So you'll narrow down from multiple options, and you might draw a picture, or you might build something out of popsicle sticks or Post-it notes or clay or what have you. But you're actually going to try to build what you think your solution is. Then you have the last component of this approach, which is testing and implementing. And in the testing stage, you actually are showing your prototype. You're not talking, you're just showing, and then you're getting feedback. And you're using that information again to then eventually implement a minimally viable solution that's going to be beneficial to the problem that you're trying to solve for your customer. Please note that there's arrows here that indicate that this is a non-linear process, right? So it looks like it's linear, but at each stage, you can always go back to the prior or the prior stage to get more information, so that as you're refining solutions for customers, you're going to be creating something that is highly needed or wanted. Some of the things that I talked about include activities that diverge. So you're going to be trying to be as expansive as you can when you're trying to gather information, but then at times you'll converge. You'll be trying to define or choose from a whole host of different options what the problem is in this space, and what the solutions could be in this space. And at the beginning of the process, you're going to be starting off with a problem that you think a customer has, but you have to remember not to be too married to that problem or that problem statement. It's more so to be considered as a suggestion, because as you go through and conduct the empathy exercises, that problem will evolve towards something that is in alignment with your customer. It's really important to resist the temptation to immediately hold on to a particular solution that you think is to a problem, because first of all, you haven't figured out what the root problem is and what the root issues are that your customer or your user is facing. And so there's often this, this terminology that was used in ICOR where they called your baby ugly. So if you're a parent and you have children, you know, your child is the most beautiful human on the earth, and no one can tell you that your child is ugly. But in this process, sometimes what you learn tells you that your baby, your business, your product, it's ugly, and your user, your customer doesn't want it. And so you have to be willing to let that go. You have to be willing to pivot and move more towards what that customer is saying that they really need. There are several actions that are central to design thinking, kind of mindsets and approaches that I want you to take home. You have to have a bias towards action. Okay, you learn by doing. You can't just talk about what you're going to do. You actually have to do it. You have to try. You have to be motivated and inspired to try it, even if you're afraid, even if you think that someone is not going to like what you're proposing, and even if you don't know what you're doing and you have to go out and figure it out. You have to have a bias towards acting. You have to focus on human values. What is it that your customers value? And this can be something such as something concrete, such as a bonus, right? So if they perform a particular duty, they're going to receive more money. Or it could be something that's abstract, such as a feeling. They feel fulfillment through being able to accomplish a particular goal or activity. You have to keep in mind that you're going to be collaborating across boundaries. You're engaging in an endeavor to understand humans more broadly. And that means that you have to touch as many humans as possible. You have to have a diversity of perspectives to inform the ideas that you're developing. You also have to note that this is a team sport. And so in science, there's often the notion that you are the person creating and producing the knowledge, even though there's a whole community of scientists and trainees that have supported your work, but you are the one that gets the credit. And in innovation, that's not necessarily the case. You are working together as a team, and each team member has a very important role to play. And so you have to be willing and able to collaborate, adjust, and navigate different challenges as a team. You want to be mindful of process. There's a whole reason why you're going through this journey, and you have to sometimes let the process happen. Let people speak and tell you what they need. And then finally, you're prototyping towards a solution, and you're showing that prototype. You're not telling. You have to take yourself out of the situation, and you have to make sure that you're not infusing your own perspective when you're engaging with customers and users. And so when you look at science and you look at design thinking in terms of the approach, right, the scientific method, there are many areas that are convergent and work in parallel, and some things that are divergent. For example, scientific activities include analyzing how users interact with products. And so you're investigating the conditions in which those users operate. You're researching what a user needs. You may be pooling experiences from previous project or previous data or information, and considering past or present or future conditions that are specific to the product. Differently, the scientific approach mainly includes a majority of known qualities, and you've been able to narrow down your project to a specific question that can be tested with a hypothesis. And the idea is that the hypothesis can be tested with a particular experiment. But you might want to flip it and think of design thinking as also experimentation. But now the hypotheses are testing are your first best guess, and you're conducting experiments with users to test whether or not what you thought was correct or incorrect. And in either way, when you test a hypothesis, if the hypothesis is negated, you get information. And if the hypothesis is accurate, you gain information. And that's the same kind of way you want to approach design thinking. So you're gathering information at every point. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm going to end on broad frameworks around design thinking. And for interest of time, we're going to focus on the first aspect, where you may be just going out and starting out with the work that you're doing with HBCU Maker Showcase. And so I'm going to do a deep dive on empathy and empathizing with your customer. And I'm going to do that because there's a very important aspect, right? Empathy is basically the foundation. It's the beginning of human-centered design. And to empathize, you can either observe folks that are within the context of their lives. So you maybe go visit folks and see how they engage with different products and conduct different jobs. You can engage them directly, requesting interviews with users or customers, and have short chats or scheduled longer focus groups. And you can also immerse yourself in the experience of what the users experience. Empathy is very important because you have to work past any preconceived notions that you may have coming into a particular endeavor and venture. And you have to be able to alter what your preconceived notions are by informing yourself with information from your customers. It's also important to understand and have empathy because you need to be able to align the value proposition of what you're selling with the customer's needs. Because if the customer doesn't care about what you're selling, they're not going to buy. And so for folks who are not familiar, the way I see a value proposition is that it's a concept that describes what a business is offering to a customer that makes that customer choose the innovation. And if you Google the term value proposition, you'll see a whole host of definitions. But what I like to see is that it's the value that a company promises to deliver to customers should they choose to buy their product. And so this value, this entity, this process, this product, this feature, this organization, this action, that value can encompass a number of things that can be abstract or concrete, right? So as I was referring to earlier, the value was we're going to be able to give you more money. A customer will be able to make more money because they have your innovation. Or it can be something that is abstract. That innovation in itself is going to give them a feeling of fulfillment or bring them joy as a result of having it. Your goal in creating a value proposition is to create a unique value proposition, and one that focuses first on what your customers' needs are and what their cares are, and also the intersection of what you do very well. What you're hoping to do is to identify something that is not what your competition does very well. And so at this intersection here, you'll be able to create a value proposition that is one that will give you an edge when it comes to advancing your venture. As you can see in these first two areas, you'll be gathering information from your customer about what they're already getting from your competitors and what they need and care about. And so empathy is really important here. And to empathize is to put yourself into another person's shoes, right? And to see things from their perspective. So you have to release your own preconceived notions. To be able to get started with empathy, I want you to sit with your team and think about all the different types of people that are within the umbrella or the ecosystem in which your customer is going to be engaging. You want to keep in mind that your customer is the person who is buying what you're selling. But keep in mind that sometimes your customer is not the person that is using what you're selling. So for example, I often like to give the acknowledgement of a toy that your child might see on television, because this toy is bright, it's shiny, it has wonderful colors, it lights up, it makes noises, and your child wants it, right? But who is buying? The parents, okay? So when toy producers or manufacturers, toy companies are trying to create innovations for customers, they have to keep in mind that they provide information to the parent that's relevant, such as the age appropriate level of the toy, safety information, all of the things that parents care about, as well as visual things that make it look enticing for the child that wants the toy. You also want to think about the ecosystem in which other individuals will be navigating. So there may be, for certain technologies, regulation behind what you're trying to do. So you want to be able to engage with folks that are regulators. And ideally, on the back end, you might try to engage with folks that are willing to sabotage what you're doing, because maybe your technology or your innovation is going to take someone's job away. And so they're going to block it from being incorporated or bought, or a competitor that might be in your ecosystem. You have to have knowledge and engage with folks within this entire ecosystem. And so this presentation is starting to change from being one of lecture to one of charging you to do action. And the first charge is you need to go out and you need to talk to folks. And so as you do that, I want to give you several tips for how you're going to be empathizing, or how you're going to be building and engaging with customers and users and all of those other peoples in that ecosystem. I understand that right now you still might be in a state of emergency because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so first and foremost, safety first, be safe. But when possible, it's ideal to interview folks in person. The next best option is by video conference, like Zoom or Skype. And then the last resort is phone. Now, why do I say this? When it's safe, you'll find that when you go out and you engage folks in person, you'll be able to observe a number of things. You'll be able to observe their environment. You'll be able to observe their body language. And you'll be able to know if they are excited to talk to you, or they are really just trying to move on and give you whatever information they think you want to know so that you can leave them alone, right? Again, when you're in person, you can visit them in your environment. And in some situations, if you have a very close relationship, you can ask them to photojournal, hand them a throwaway camera and have them take pictures of kind of their day-to-day life if they're comfortable. And when you're engaging with interviewees, you want to make sure that you're using body language that has engaged listening, and I'll cover that in a minute, as well as ask open-ended questions. So you want the answer to those questions to be an answer that is not yes or no, right? Because there's a difference between asking, is this rose red? And what color is this rose, right? There'll be two different answers to those questions. Most importantly, it's always important to ask for a referral. Who else should you talk to, or who else can I talk to know more? Because you're expanding your network, you're trying to develop and conduct customer discovery, and you may just be starting out, and those individuals know best who else are in their own ecosystem. So that's always the last question that I ask. When you're conducting interviews in person, make sure that your body language is showing that you're engaged in listening. And I forgot to mention that it's very important that you conduct these interviews in teams. You want one person to be doing all the talking and engaging with the interviewee, and then you want the other person who's taking copious notes and writing down what's being said. If you're kind of going it alone, you want to maybe try to bring a friend or find somebody who can help you out, because you really want to be able to focus in on the body language of the interviewee. You ensure that your body is on the same level with the person that you're interviewing, and keep eye contact. So as you know, as you can see, you absolutely have to have someone there taking notes, because it's hard to take notes and keep eye contact. Smile and nod to communicate that you're listening and to keep the conversation and environment friendly. And when they see your team member taking notes, they'll know that they'll feel that what is being said is important. If at any point there's kind of a lull in the conversation and they're just thinking, or they may not know, don't be tempted to try to fill the space with some kind of information that you want to provide. Really focus on getting them to be the center of attention and to talk freely. And that just comes with building rapport. It's very important as you're engaging and talking to an interviewee, and even as you're starting to request opportunities to chat or have an interview, that you avoid talking about your business. You can say, I am interested in this part. I'm a student and I have a project on this particular topic, and you would appreciate if they could share their knowledge or share their information about that. If you're a faculty member or an administrator, you might want to go with the student and say, my student has a project that they're trying to engage in, or I have a project that I'm thinking about. But you don't want to say this is your business, because you don't want to bias the interviewee and what they're trying to say, because that confirmation bias is only going to help you, is only going to give you a disservice, and you're not going to get unfiltered and unfiltered information from your interviewee. The other thing is, you have something that is your intellectual property, and you don't want to disclose what you're working on and risk exposing your intellectual property before you have an opportunity to determine if it's even worth protecting, right? So make sure that as you're approaching it, you leave your preconceived notions behind. Don't talk about your business. Don't talk about what you're trying to do. Just talk about them and try to understand what they're about. And the questions that you're asking should not lead or inspire them to request a non-disclosure agreement or an NDA. You're just having a conversation. Some starter questions that you can use to kick off the conversation would be, what are you currently used to conduct a particular activity? Or can you let me know kind of what a day in the life of your work looks like? What do you like about what you're doing? What do you hate about you doing? What do you dislike? What would you like to be improved? And what has worked or what has not worked from what you tried to address that? Once you are able to open up the conversation, you got to go deeper and you got to get more to the root of any pain or gain or any type of job that they're trying to do. There's this term called use the 5 whys, where you're asking why or asking questions when applicable 5 times. Yes, Allison loves it, right? So if someone says, you know, I love making pancakes, I would say, why? Well, because I like to put nuts and cranberries in them. Why do you do that? Well, because, you know, in the morning when I was a little kid, my mom used to make that for me. And you say, why? And because, you know, this is her way of showing love. And that's how I want to show love to my kids, right? And so immediately you're unearthing the value of, you know, this person likes pancakes, but they also value it because it gives that person nostalgia, right? Which is a clue to what they value and something that you can incorporate into what you're trying to develop. As you're gaining more information, keep in mind or even ask if something is particularly nice to have, or is it something that's absolutely needed, right? Is it something that they could get by with? Or is it something that if they don't have it, they're in trouble, right? And you want to focus on the information that tells you that something is needed, like yesterday. That is where you want to focus on developing solutions for the problem. You don't want things that are nice to have, because that means that they can always look at your innovation and be like, oh, that would be nice, but not buy, okay? As you're digging deeper, try to understand more deeply, what is it that they specifically do? What are their jobs? What is it that brings them frustration? What creates pain for them? And what's something that creates joy or helps them gain something like money or time or sleep, for example. But you know that you're on the right track when you're hearing information that helps you understand where you need to move forward next. Okay, so I've talked a lot and more than I'm comfortable doing for innovation training, but I want to make a note that we are stopping here at the empathy step. And what I hope to do is to kind of help you move towards definition, but you know, if AAAS wants me to come back, I can move into the other sections as well. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have you do an exercise, and for your own protection of your intellectual property, we'll have you do report outs after the recording is over. But for now, if you're at a computer or you have a piece of paper, I want you to try to implement some of the things that I've been talking about. Who is your customer? Who is going to pay you, right? And not only who, as in the person, not in industry, a person, what is their title? Now, if you don't know title, you can always Google, go on LinkedIn, look on a Facebook group, look for clues in, ideally online or in other ways, that help you fully define which individual has the authority to make purchasing decisions, okay? Take a guess, create your own hypotheses around what their jobs are, their pain creators, their gain creators, and then that gives you a baseline to compare to. No problem, Allison, once they give you information. Guess about how they might feel about the jobs or the pain creators or gain creators. And as you're going into the interview, think about what insights you hope to learn, but be open to actually what you actually learn, right? So I want you to do this exercise. Set some time, I'll set some time to the side for a minute or so to get you started, and then I'll finish the rest of my presentation, and we can have 1 or 2 folks report out at the end of the session. All right, so that is, who's your customer? What is their title? What are their jobs? They're pain creators or gain creators, right? How do they feel about these? And what do you hope to learn through the engagement that you have? Oh, sorry. I will go back just in case you forgot. All right, so let's move forward. All right, so the next step is moving towards that define component of the approach. It's really important that after each interview and note-taking exercise, that you come together as a team and you debrief, okay? One way to do this is to take a moment and have each person describe what they learned and what ideas came forth from the interview. You want to do this once you leave the area and you're in a space where you're comfortable. And it's very important that you let each person speak without interruption, because you should be listening to what they're saying. You can be capturing your ideas or compelling stories on Post-it notes or on large sheets of paper. And you want to kind of make sure that when you put it down, you can come back to it in 2 weeks and understand what you said. So use concise sentences so that everyone can understand, as well as people who may not have been there. You want to capture quotes that are particularly compelling, a person's life history or household details, aspirations, barriers, and other things that really stood out to you. And then when you're finished writing everything down on Post-its, organize them into themes, because that's going to help you in the future interviews that you do in terms of how you structure your questions. Once you have conducted a good number of interviews, at least 30, if not 60 to 100, right? And so, there's a lot of work you have to do ahead. You want to start writing down the top 5 ideas that start to emerge repeatedly, right? Make sure that you're sharing, because these are themes that you're going to be using to inform your value proposition and your business. Okay, so with that, please share your thoughts. You can put it in the chat. You can post it on Twitter or Instagram. And just briefly say, what is it that you learned just now? What is it that you learned that was new? So for folks who've been here for a minute, if you heard something that's different, please share that. But go ahead and take a moment to share your thoughts. And while you do that, I'm going to talk about a couple of opportunities that are offered in terms of funding opportunities. And so I organize them for faculty and administrators, for trainees that are undergraduates or graduate or postdoctoral trainees, and then also just design thinking resources that I've been sharing throughout the talk today. I just want to give you a heads up about opportunities at the National Science Foundation for those that work in an academic space. There are many opportunities for you to translate your technology and even start at the most early stage of development, right? From basic research and proof of concept to early stage companies. And so there's opportunities for you as a faculty member to work at a company through the GOLI program and through supplements to current NSF awards. Graduate student trainees can also conduct an internship in industry or a non-academic organization. Universities and companies can also form partnerships or centers through the IUCRC program, and through the Partnerships for Innovation program, you can request funding to prototype particular innovations after you've gone through this customer discovery experience. As I referred to earlier, I-Core or Innovation Core is an experience in which academic teams that typically include a technical lead, such as a faculty member or a postdoc, a trainee, and a business mentor partner up to go out and conduct the customer discovery that I just walked you through. And we often provide that in the form of $50,000 mini grants. But then there are also smaller grants that are conducted through the I-Core Sites program at individual institutions and broader network opportunities through the hub solicitation. And small businesses or companies are eligible to request funds to help contribute towards research on their innovations through the Small Business Innovation Research or Small Business Technology Transfer Program. And so I highly encourage you to read about all of these opportunities that might apply to you and reach out to a program officer for the SBIR, STTR program. There's even kind of a mini form that you fill out that helps you identify whether or not you should proceed with submitting a grant proposal. So that's great and a nice savior of time. In addition, the Convergence Accelerator is a new organizational structure that's geared towards accelerating the transition of use-inspired convergence research into practice. It focuses on building team capacity around exploratory and high-risk projects in pre-identified technical tracks. I'm going to do a quick deep dive here on that. Typically, the ideas or the different tracks are generated through a series of workshops. And so the Convergence Accelerator will initiate a call for workshops around a variety of topics. And individuals will work very closely with program officers in creating and setting up those workshops. And then also eventually, if a workshop topic is chosen, moving towards phase 1 award, where they're actually taking the next 9 months to plan. Now, teams can consist of any type of entity imaginable, right? So you can have companies form a team with schools, or universities form a team with government, or hospitals form a team with academics. It's a very new and innovative environment to be in, and focusing on ideally translating use-inspired research. There's also a second phase where selected teams from the first will receive up to $5 million for up to 2 years to further develop and meet the deliverables of what was proposed. And the hope is that there will be nationally scalable and sustainable societal impact. Now, for trainees, there are a whole host of opportunities for you to engage with innovation, and through the Innovative Postdoctoral Entrepreneurial Research Fellowships, or IPERF, there are opportunities for early career STEM postdocs from underrepresented groups to have an opportunity to work at a company through the IPERF program. It's a rolling deadline, but usually matching occurs and ends in March of each year. There's also a collaboration between I-Core and the National GEM Consortium that focuses on engaging underrepresented master's or doctoral trainees in the I-Core program to encourage and broaden participation of individuals going through I-Core. And they are constantly recruiting, and they always have workshops on each Wednesday of the month at 12 o'clock Eastern. Finally, as I mentioned before, the intern program is an opportunity for trainees that are being supported by NSF funding to conduct internships in a non-academic entity. You can receive up to $55,000 towards support. And if you have more questions, you can access the contacts that are in the chat or on this slide. And finally, your Campus Innovation Center is an amazing resource for understanding and learning about innovation, entrepreneurship, and design thinking. And so I encourage you to find them. Sometimes they'll be in business schools, sometimes they will be in an engineering program, or they'll be a completely separate entity. But they're a very rich resource that you can often lean on. Now, many of the topics and concepts that I talked about have come from the creators of IDEO, which also originated at the Stanford D School. And so they have a treasure trove of resources that you can leverage that refer to some of the work that I've done today. And the Nielsen Norman Group, which are leaders in user interface design, also created some of the concepts that I talked about in my talk today. I also like sharing the Designing Your Life book for individuals who are trying to figure out the next step or the ways to ensure that they are aware of all the amazing different options and wonderful paths your life can take. And it's a wonderful way to really reframe your mindset around from figuring out what you want to do when you grow up to understanding that anything that you do is amazing, and and it gives you design thinking tools to get yourself to a place where you are pursuing or moving in a direction in which you're going to have a joyful life in whatever that is that you do. And so with that, I want to thank everyone for attending. Thank you for your questions and your comments, for posting online. If you want to follow me, I'm on Twitter at OneWittyDoc. You can Instagram me also at Nnakwe Whitley, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you, Iris, Neela, and Tarek, and thank you to AAAS for inviting me to speak. And at this point, I will take any questions, and we can also stop the recording.